Starting a new army project is a huge task and take forever, right? Well, yes and no. Because in this video I'm going to show you that a huge army box like this is a challenge, but it's doable in just 5 work days. Impossible? Let me show you all the tricks and demonstrate how it's done.
Hi, my name is Toby, and after this disastrous intro, let me welcome you to my channel Paint Quest. So what's the plan for today's quest? Well, I've previously tackled a couple of 24-hour army box challenges and gained valuable insights from each attempt. Typically, I'll divide the 24 hours into 3 days, allocating 8 hours each and making it feasible to complete over 3 weekends or similar intervals. However, my weekends are currently booked with other commitments, so for this video I'll be devoting my evenings after work for this hobby challenge. And I'm preparing this High Elves army for the old world setting. Well, sometimes you just want to get paint on minis, use them in our overcomplicated games and have fun throwing some dice with friends. From the distance of 2 arms length away, you won't notice little mistakes and other things become more important in a paint job. And painting wise, that'll be the main focus of this project. I just have to show you this awesome box I got the miniatures from. This is the 2010 starter box of the old Warhammer fantasy game, which was discontinued 2015 in favor of Age of Sigmar. These sculpts are just old, but still really nice. Just look at them, they hold up really well, I have to say. And if you want to get started with the old world, with the High Elves for example, or even with Age of Sigmar with the new edition just around the corner, and if you want to play this game, this secret starter box is for you. I got mine for well under 100 bucks on eBay, was a really good deal. If you have patience and look out, you might be able to get one yourself. Thanks to the design of these miniatures, I hardly need to glue multiple parts together. These are either push-fit or single-piece minis. As for the building and mold line removal step, I don't have a quick fix to offer, it simply takes time depending on the kits you're assembling. In this step I basically clip all the parts from the little miniatures on little piles and then I glue them together and remove mold lines. All in all, this evening the building step took me about 3 hours. I still had some time left and I spent another hour designing the bases with texture paste, which is super fast, and I also had some leftover 3D printed base toppers. I used these base toppers for my 40k Eldari Combat Patrol, and these futuristic elven ruins can be perfectly repurposed for Warhammer Fantasy. No one will notice, right? Miniature wise I finished about half and then I called it a night. Okay, second evening I finished basing the rest of the miniatures with texture paste and now it's time for priming. And here's the first major time saving tip. Use rattle cans for priming. I can't say this enough. I've done this a couple of times now, these kind of hobby challenges, and this is one huge time saver. While I've used an airbrush in the past for this, it simply takes too much time. For this color scheme and painting style, a white base is sufficient. So this step is completed swiftly and took just about 30 minutes in total. After a short break, we can now start painting. Alright, next up is the first installment of batch painting. This method saves time because you don't have to switch paints constantly and repetition helps you to work faster. However, it can become quite tedious and dull after painting several minis with this process. The first problem to solve will be the bases. I'll paint the entire army with speed paint because they shade and color in one go. So they are just perfect to re-establish this old painting style from the 90s I'm looking for my army. Also with them you can add color variation layer by layer, and due to their nature of being transparent, you can feather and blend them perfectly onto each other. With this little nifty trick you can create some interesting grassy green and muddy bases, like this. Overall this saves time. In just 30 minutes all the soldiers' bases were done. And in another 30 minutes all the other minis were also ready. With that, day 2 is complete and I call it a night. Now the real work begins. This is where the plan you made before and the order of the paints you use make a huge difference. To make batch painting super effective, you need to paint at least one test model before you start an entire army project. In this case I painted 2 models beforehand. Well, first this will help you to pick the color scheme and avoid any surprises. And secondly, it'll help you to figure out how to achieve the final look you're aiming for. And that with a minimal amount of time. What I mean is to determine the optimal order of applying the paints. Here you can see the first model I did, which is absolutely not where I wanted to end up color-wise. Just look at this one, it looks like a cloud. But this is really important. It's crucial to make these kind of mistakes and learn what not to do before diving into a huge project and batch painting. Second try was much better. I decided to paint the elves in somewhat similar to the box art, opting for the classic blue-white scheme. And then it's time to note down all the colors and the optimal painting order to minimize the effect of painting mistakes. This list is super important and it will help you to paint faster. I have a little booklet like this just for these kind of recipes. Also, I make short content of these kind of steps so I can watch the process later and be reminded of what colors I used and what techniques I used to achieve the effect I was looking for. And yes, some of the reels I post on Instagram and the shorts here on YouTube are actually just a way to save paint recipes for myself. So if you're interested, just follow along. Painting with blue now in this specific order is intentional. You see, I made some mistakes with silver and the other color over here and over there. I know from the test model that blue covers really well, so by being extra careful in this step I can actually correct some mistakes by simply painting over them. This step takes some little extra time because I don't want to make too many new mistakes, but overall I end this evening with 3.5 hours on the clock. I think that's nice and I call it a night. Day 4, it's time to paint more soldiers. It takes way more time than I initially expected to paint the soldiers, but they have just too many small details. But as mentioned before, I have a plan, so it's time to get out the recipe and start painting. I have to note here, painting minis should normally not be about speed, it's about fun. I actually do these kind of hobby marathon really rarely, even though if you look at my channel, it might suggest otherwise. It really has the potential to drain your hobby spirit and dull you a bit with this kind of batch painting repetition. But I also want to prove that you can finish a project really fast and that you also can battle your pile of grey and do it too. With a plan, it's possible to tackle your mountain of plastic and get it ready for the tabletop. Let's be real, many of us have way more big boxes of unpainted stuff in our pile of opportunity than we actually would like to admit. And sometimes it's just nice to get some things done and off your plate and have them ready for the tabletop. All in all, it took me way more time than I expected and I closed the evening with another 4 hours of batch painting. But I didn't stop there. Sometimes it's also important to completely finish something and get this kick of accomplishment. I quickly invested another half an hour and painted the base rims of all the minis done so far. Now the colorful bases really pop out and shine and everything looks neat and amazing. Day 5, it's the last evening. The army's already in really good shape and I need to batch paint the riders and spend the remaining time on the character models. The mage and the hero on the giant bird cat thingy. And as a little treat, I concentrate on the mage first and painted the entire model in one go. The riders after that get the same recipe as the foot soldiers. This again took way more time than expected. There's just so many details on these sculpts. But fortunately I only had to paint a couple of those riders. And with that it's time for another tip when doing these kinds of projects. Get a really comfortable chair. This one is okay for an hour or so, but if you do longer sessions, you really need something else. And with this little chair here, it's way more comfortable for the neck and also for the back. And 4.5 hours later, I was finally done with all the riders and I'm completely exhausted. There's only one more miniature left, the character model on the griffin. Unfortunately with this, I broke my time window for the 5 evening cap in this challenge because instead of just working late into the night on this mini and just prove the world and myself that I can do it in 5 days, I said okay, I continue this the next day. Sleep is really important, also a good tip, don't stress yourself. Some deadlines, especially deadlines you set yourself, can be broken. While I'll paint this miniature to full glory, let me thank Floppy for supporting me on Patreon. Thanks mate, this means a lot and I really appreciate the support for tiny creators like me. You rock buddy. Should you also want to join our Discord, link to Patreon is in the description. because it's just one more model and I gave it basically the same treatment as the others, it was completely done after only 2 hours on Saturday morning. But I'm not done. I have one more tip before I let you go and show you the entire army finished. But first, let's tackle this quest. Can you paint an entire army done only in a week? Yes, it's possible. Adding up the hours, the entire project took 21 hours to complete. Was this fast? You decide. So between the week I finished the project and now, where I record this part of the video, is a little more than a month. In the meantime, I spent more hours on some details, and let me show you why. When you paint fast, you of course make mistakes. You will paint over some areas, you have some pooling on plain surfaces, and that leads to some imperfections. And from afar, you won't even notice that, and when everything is painted, it just melts together. However, with some extra time invested, you can make it really shine. And the best part is, it doesn't even have to be done initially, because you can always go back and spend more time on some parts of the army. And in the meantime, the army is ready for the tabletop. For example, if you look at this regiment, the main focus is the front row, right? Because you can't even see some parts of the miniatures in the back. So I just touch up these 4 models here in the front row. We'll start with the champion here, for example. I add some details like painting the gems. This is done really fast in 4 layers. And then some additional shading on the metal, for example, and some other parts. We'll focus on the face and some additional highlights on the corners and edges. So here we are. It looks super nice. Let's put it to the others. At this distance, this is more than enough, and it was so much fun to just touch up a miniature which was already painted to tabletop standard. The takeaway of this video is it's possible to finish an entire army in just 1 week. You just need to plan a little bit, find a good compromise between quality and speed, and you just need to get to work. If I can do it, and that's the message here, so can you. And now let's have a look at the entire army painted. If you haven't seen any of my other hobby marathons, you should check this one out, where I paint an entire combat patrol in only 24 hours. See you in the next one. Bye bye.